Welcome, everyone, to the Montero podcast. I'm your host, Dominic, and I have Matt Ziebro here today with us. He has a couple different companies that we're going to talk about, so I'm not even going to start to try to explain what he's all dabbling in currently, but he's an entrepreneur at heart, and I'm looking forward to the conversation, so I'm just going to welcome him. How are you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, doing great. So let's just dive in. Why don't you kind of
Okay.
give a background into the businesses that you own and how you've gotten into it and how you've expanded to the repertoire that you now have.
Okay. Sounds cool. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I look forward to speaking with you further here today. So it kind of started back late and mid to let's call mid 90s, post college. I always felt like I wanted to do something for myself. And I had jobs through college and software programmer right after college. And so I tried the first thing I tried was to become a financial, wealth planner. And when you're 22 years old and you don't have a nickel, it's hard to tell somebody, "Hey, give me $500,000 and I'll invest it for you." That that was
Understandable.
my one complete abysmal failure in my storied past. But I wasn't daunted. So we had two other buddies and myself. We were all kind of newly married there at the end of the nineties, and we'd get together at parties and we'd say, "Oh, some guy, started this business, or somebody came up with a pet rock, or whatever it is," and we were always sort of, drinking a beer and thinking, "Man, somebody else is just doing something for themselves. What can we do?" So the Telecommunications Act was passed in like '96, end of the 90s, which kind of deregulated things. So we started a telecommunications company, and we launched into 1998, and that was my first foray into really, doing a business right. It grew pretty substantially, and I wanted to do something else by like '05, and so I sold out my third of the business to my partners. The business still exists today and still going strong, whatever, 28 years later, something like that. And so I went into corporate America for a hot minute. I think in '08, my wife and I started a drop ship company. It was called stylishbeachhome.com, because we kind of liked Florida and all things tropical. Living in the Cincinnati area, you just don't get to see that.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, SEO, learning how, website, e-commerce worked back in the day. Certainly a lot has changed. But there weren't all the tools you have today to build things and make it easy and do all that kind of stuff. And AI, it was all just grind and grind and grind and write copy and SEO and all that stuff. We exited that in 2013, and I exited corporate America at the same time. We had an opportunity to start a staffing agency, staffing, recruiting, a direct placement, that kind of stuff. And we did that in 13, and we went from 0 to 6 million in 4 years. So it was kind of a crazy climb there. And we had heard from a fellow owner that they were in talks with some, VC people for a purchase, and their deal fell apart, and they reached out to us. And I don't know, you always sit down and have a conversation. You never know what's going to happen. Try to talk to as many people as you can in life. I guess that would be my first thing here is always be looking, be aware of what's going on in the business space, be aware of weird niches. If you meet people, find out what are they doing. It's so interesting how many businesses get started because somebody's complaining about a problem, and all of a sudden you go, "Man, if I had a solution to that problem, I could do X, Y, and Z." So if you're going to do something for yourself, it's not going to land on your doorstep. You have to be intentional about it. So you got to read and talk to people, and just talk to people. And it's amazing what you find out when you talk to people. So we sat down, we had the meeting. I told my wife, before we went, let's think of a big number, and you have the meeting. And 3 days later, they called and said, "We'll take it." So it was like, crap, now what do I do? So we have a bunch of kids, 8 to be exact. And my second daughter was first one to get married, was engaged, or just about engaged. And her fiance was a guy that was working for a custom home builder. And I had been looking at this business called Garage Living, where we kind of bling out garages for folks, floor coatings, cabinets, wall storage, car lifts, you name it. And so I thought, well, if I did the sales and marketing side, and Joe, my son-in-law, kind of handled operations, we could be the dynamic duo. And so we started that at the end of 18. We're still going real strong right now. We did about 3 million last year. We're by far the largest here in the Cincinnati market space. And, that just requires, as time goes on, you're doing less of the tasks. You've heard the old saying, right, Dominic? Don't work in your business, but like work on your business. And that's a discipline that people have to figure out over time, because if they keep being in the business, then they become their own pinch point. The business doesn't grow because they have to touch too many things. And everybody has the same amount of hours in the day, regardless of your income, ethnicity, anything else. We have X amount of hours that we're able to work in a day. And you have to be smart about those hours. And I think you got to find people, you got to delegate, you got to get the right people in position. And then you have to empower them. You have to create safe spaces. We like to say, no shame, no blame. Like, I'll never get angry at anybody for somebody bringing a problem. It happened. It's done. What do we do? How do we make that never happen again? And I think you have to focus on that positivity and that going forward kind of thing, because no employee wants to be beaten up. You know what I mean? And I find that if you really help people's careers, educate them, train them, give them the tools that they need, they really flower, right? And they want to stay with the company. They want to do good things. They're getting larger and larger compensation every year. And so you kind of build a winner. So that's Garage Living of Cincinnati, and that's one of the businesses. And
Is
then
that a franchise, or is that
it is
something
a
that you started?
franchise.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a franchise, right? And then daughter number three, going to get married 2 years later. And my son-in-law to be was University of Cincinnati with a finance degree, kind of just about done with school. And we kind of had some conversations, and I said, would you like to do something? And we looked for about a year. And the interesting thing there is you're kind of getting a business for somebody, and it might not be exactly the business you want, but if you're not going to be the one doing it day to day, you got to kind of release you have to release your own prejudices, and that kind of stuff. And we bought a tree service business, trimming trees, taking trees down, plant healthcare, tree healthcare, that kind of stuff. And that's been going since we started in early 21. So that's been going ever since. And we're going to do probably somewhere in the range of $900,000 this year. For a 27-year-old kid, I'm pretty impressed. He's gotten up every day. He's got fire in the belly. He's got a little anxiety, and he knows that, he's got to do it. There's nobody else around. He can use me as his guardian angel, but I can't run the business for him. So super proud of him. We meet on a regular basis. And this comes to point number two, and that is, when you're in business, you have to find colleagues, friends, other entrepreneurs. You need to associate with other people who are living the same life you're living, because it isn't corporate America. It's very different. And you have to wear different hats during the day. You have different kinds of frustrations, and you got to find people who can mentor you, who you can mentor, because there's something cool about helping somebody newer in the business or younger than you are. Like that really feels like a give back, that you were blessed in some way and you give that back to somebody else. But then you have mentors and you have colleagues and friends that you can just whine and complain to about something sometimes. Get it off your chest, because it can be a lonely world when you're running your own business. You're kind of the man at the top, the woman at the top, and there's nobody else around, and there's only so much you can say to employees. So I would really highly encourage anybody that's looking to get into business to understand that it takes a village. You have to have people around you. You have to have different strengths, whether it's accountants or attorneys or just, friends that have other business experience. Seek out those people, keep those friendships alive, and that will sharpen your saw and empower you as you go through the journey. Because it is and Dominic, you talk to a lot of people, right? They all tell you the same thing. And I've run into a lot of business owners in my various capacities. And that is that there are dark days, and sometimes it's only grit that kind of gets you through. You have to decide what you're made of at some point. And there's so many successful companies out there. I mean, you can look at Elon Musk, sleeping in his car in 2011 with, $10,000 to his name. Again, you just got to go to grit sometimes. You have to believe in what you got going on. You got to be speaking to intelligent people. And if it's right, you have to just keep your nose to the grindstone and push through. And then, along the way, we just started layering some other things. So we bought into a home tutoring business. COVID really did a number, of course, on our kids, right? I mean, school kind of went to hell in a handbasket. We lost like 2 years of school, basically. So these kids are falling behind, and families were reaching out with tutoring needs. And so my wife started that business and ran that. It's called Club Z Tutoring. So that was another foray into, she wanted to do something after we sold the staffing business. It was like, okay, well, I want to get back into business. So that's her gig. And then again, as time goes on, as you start to have these conversations with other people, you realize other facets of investment, of business, and that kind of thing. And if you're capable, you can diversify. You don't want to diversify, the term. Don't do so much that you're doing everything half cocked and you're not decent at something, but you have to know what you can fit in time wise. So we started, I joined in with some other folks, and we started doing what's called syndication of multifamily. So we're trying to get properties, 50 units to, 200 units, somewhere in that space. And you hire in management, you hire in construction, you upgrade those. You can obviously bump rents when you do that. So that's something that's kind of passive. I check in with the board, every quarter. We get quarterly reports on everything, and if anything major comes up, we can obviously jump in on a call on that. But that's one of those slow and steady kind of thing. You just have the right people in place, make sure you got good project managers, and that's the other nice thing. And then in 2023, I became aware of sort of the growing interest in men's health, right? The ladies have been taking care of themselves forever, and you have men with means, and their wives are out Botox and enhanced, and they're getting lymphatic massages and skincare and all this stuff. And meanwhile, the guy is just slaving away at his job, and he might be overweight. He's not getting enough sleep. He just doesn't feel right. But he's a soldier, and he goes in and he's doing what he has to do. And so we found out about a clinic that was operating out of California called Game Day Men's Health, and they had been around since 2015. Started to do research in this whole concept of, low testosterone. We've had so many environmental issues. We got microplastics, we've got diet in America, we've got, all kinds of additives and so on and so forth. And over time, what studies have shown is that men's testosterone on average, even for a normal, healthy guy, has dropped over the years, and consequently, that starts to create issues. Weight gain being a big one, fatigue being another one, ADHD, inability to focus, all those kind of things. So we purchased the option on 3 men's healthcare clinics, and we opened our first one in Fair Lawn, Ohio, which is where LeBron James has his 20,000 square foot mansion there when he used to play for the Cavs back in the day. So it's a nice area of town between
Sure.
Cleveland and Akron. And we provide, weight loss services, whether that be GLP-1s or GLP-3s, peptides, and we provide the testosterone. Very important there. This is different than going to your gym and somebody wants to take you out the back door and say, "Hey, I got some testosterone for you." Not. I just want to clarify
Sure.
the Arnold Schwarzenegger days are not what we're into. You really have to get bioidentical, right? Or else you can do, if you're not under doctor's care, I know guys, some of these people take it and they think they're experts at this kind of thing, but you can hurt yourself and you could do damage if you're not under a doctor's care, because our doctors are sending out for labs on a regular basis. We're checking people's levels. We're comparing with their primary care. You want to treat somebody holistically. Somebody handing you some steroids, hey, pop a couple of these and you feel great every day. It might work for a hot minute, but you're probably doing damage over the long run.
Sure.
So yeah, so that's we provide that, and then of course sexual health too. That's another thing. Again, women are used to going to their docs, at an early age, and they get everything checked out, and us guys, man, just the thought of going to a doctor will go,
Yeah.
Pause on that one. I'll go 90 days from now. Pause on that. I'll go 90 days from now. I both my parents sadly passed away, 60s, looked great, cancer. Just really not getting the checkups. So I can't recommend enough to everybody, but guys in particular, because we're just stupid about it. I hate to say it, and we avoid the doctor and it's uncomfortable and whatever else. Man, go get those labs. So many things are preventable. So many things, like, let's figure that stuff out early before it gets to be a real crisis. And then surgery is the only answer, or, something debilitating happens. So that's my little commercial there. Is the more I've gotten into it, you just realize that a lot of guys are hurting, but they're soldiers, man. They just don't say anything, and they're doing their work every day, right? So
How's
yeah.
that work out for the business that it, like you're saying that basically guys are like resisting, care? Like how's it is since you opened the clinic, is it going well? Is it like almost like
Yeah, it's going well.
a valve?
It's a slow climb, right? You in that kind of business, you have very high cost doctors. I have to have a chief medical officer. I got a guy who works at the Cleveland Clinic who's reviewing cases, that kind of thing. Got to stay in compliance with all this stuff. We have a lab. So you have some pretty big upfront costs, but it's kind of a subscription model, because essentially you start to make people feel better, then they're going to take what you're prescribing, every month, right? They're going to get it mail ordered to them and that kind of stuff. So we find that if we can get over that hump, get somebody to try something sometime, give them 1 or 2 months. What we find is you make a customer for life, and they're pretty sticky, right? Because they're feeling better, they're looking better. We're constantly amazed at the transformation in 6 months from a guy that came in that looked like death warmed over with a pot belly, and all of a sudden you can see he's lost 30 pounds 6 months later, and just talking, energetic, that kind of thing. Like vitality has returned, and he feels like he's taken 10 years off his life. So it's a very rewarding business, because you're affecting positive change, and you're educating people about healthy lifestyles, and we're supplementing where we need, a little medical intervention at the same time. So that's a pretty cool business. We opened our second clinic. Oh, so we opened our first one in August of 24, and we opened our second clinic in May of 25. And then later this year, we'll be opening a third clinic, kind of all in the same region up there, but about 15 miles apart from each other. And we'll be opening our third. So that's an interesting biz. It's a hot topic now. I like it that there is more and more awareness on guys' health. I think it's been just a totally neglected thing for the longest time, and it's about time, guys take care of themselves as well.
Awesome. Is that
Yeah,
it, or do we got more?
one more, and so one more, and
This is
again, this is
fantastic.
yeah, this is one of those things where, again, ear to the ground, talking to people, and I run into some pretty well-to-do clients here, through my garage business, and you kind of get to know them, and, they trust you after a while, and you're doing work for them, and you got several projects, and you might be coming back multiple times and doing different projects, and they get comfortable, and you start picking their brain. How did you get started? What almost sunk your business? Tell me about your life. And along the way, when you start making some money, you realize, hey, I got to have some structures in place, because I pay myself, and it's amazing. I thought I paid myself X, and by the time Uncle Sam was done with me, I had a very small Y, and I thought it was going to be more. So last year, after speaking with a bunch of my confidants, and some of my customers and so on and so forth, I kind of got into oil and gas exploration. And, that sounds like a wild goose chase. Like, oh my gosh, you're just drilling holes in the ground and hoping you hit something. And actually, that used to be the case, like way back in the day. It was just a lot of dry holes, just misses all over the place. It took a lot of money to do it. That's why you have big oil companies, and no one else could do it. But now there's technology, 3D seismic, and so on, that you just pretty much can get, a 95% chance that you're going to hit what you're looking for. And so in June of last year, I guess, kind of formed a company, and we drilled 3 wells last year, and we're on our fourth one right now. So the results have been fantastic. I'm sorry for the high gas prices right now as we're recording this thing. Wow, it's
I don't think that's your fault though. That's the war.
that is not. I thank you very much, Dominic, for the PSA there. It is not my fault. I didn't determine any of this stuff, but it is what it is. And if you notice that, I know we're looking at, green options and that kind of stuff, it only goes so far. And energy demand just continues to rise. We have all these AI data centers that they're building now. And they require massive energy amounts to run that infrastructure. And so that's just the reality of life. I mean, some people might not like it, and that's great, and it might not be your kind of investment, but the reality is the reality. A rising tide lifts all ships, and that's going to be in demand for many years. So with that, Dominic, I think I can officially say I've covered all the businesses.
I
No,
mean,
I'm not looking at another one.
well, you never know, right? You never know, but
Right,
that's
right.
quite a list that we just went through. I usually
Yeah.
try to go into a little bit more detail into the businesses, but there's so
Okay.
many, I don't know how we could do that. So why don't we do this?
Let's
Why don't
talk
you
about. Want
talk?
to talk about the garage business? Yeah, let's talk about
Well,
that one
let's
maybe.
talk about which
Okay.
ones are giving you, like, you have the biggest challenges in right now. How about that?
Okay, gotcha. It's funny because every business has a challenge, right? You talk to people all the time. Everybody says the same thing. It's just a different set of challenges. You
Sure.
always have challenges, right? So, in the men's healthcare business, you got pretty big expense. I mean, you got to buy all this equipment. You have to, you're opening a medical clinic. That can be expensive. So the challenge there is the marketing, right? How do you get that? How do you reach the people that need your service? And it's a little bit more challenging than just, PPC ads, although that's, Google pay per click. That's something certainly we can do. But what we find out is this is where AI really comes into play. What you're able to do is through back end AIs, you can kind of determine who your customer is and who is responding to that, and then the AI can go out and find other people that are similar to that. So
Mm-hmm.
again, in the lesson learned, I'm an old dog, but you got to find new tricks because I'll shut off the AIs on my phone. I don't want to be reminded I sent somebody a text message 3 days ago. Like, I just want my phone to text people and call people and get emails. I'm kind of old school that way. But when it comes to marketing, you have to jump on with this AI stuff. You do. And if you don't know it, find somebody who does, and you got to believe in the process. It's not a instant, you spend X money and you get, Y money tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. There's burn-in periods. There's AI has to learn, that kind of thing. You got to make the investment in it. Ted Turner from Turner Broadcasting and TNT and everything that Ted Turner did back in the day. He used to say, let's see, it's off to work. I go something like advertise, advertise, I got to get some sleep. I got to eat and I got to advertise and I got to advertise and I got to advertise. I got to do three of those for everything else that I do. And it's a true statement. You have to market. People have to be aware of your service and you can't look at it as a necessary evil. It's just you have to embrace I will spend in various areas to hit different parts of my funnel, right? The sales funnel, the marketing funnel. You have to target the different areas, but you got to stay committed to that. You can never fall off. There was an old cartoon 30, 40 years ago, and you got some people up presenting to the board, and they said, great news. Since we fired all the salespeople, our expenses are way down. And that's like one pane of the cartoon. And the next one over, it says, and revenue is down as well. So it's like, yeah, you got rid of the people producing the revenue and you lose the revenue. So you got to market. You got to spend on that marketing stuff. The garage business, just because of the scale, I have 15 employees. Like I said, I talked about the safe space. The other thing too is you got to bring on the right people because you can have people that are not necessarily bad, but they don't fit on the team. And that's not against them. It's just a team thing. The vibe of the team has to be right, right? We talk about this in the NFL, all sports teams. Sometimes somebody's a good quarterback. They don't work on a particular team. Sam Darnold, for example, he just won the Super Bowl with the Seahawks, and the Vikings traded him away. It said it wasn't a good fit. Clearly, he's a very talented dude,
Sure.
but sometimes maybe the team members aren't right or something like that. So, as the owner, you have to be checking those dynamics because it is better to have a good team with a great team with a little less skill than a bunch of super high skill people that can't get along with each other. One other football analogy, back in the day, I think it was 2014, 2015, the Philadelphia Eagles, before they had won all their Super Bowls, went out in free agency, and they spent a bundle on defense. They brought in the top guys that were free agents, and they built the super defense, and they sucked because it was a bunch of guys out there that were used to being the alpha dog on the team, and nobody's handing off the receivers properly. Nobody's getting in the proper coverages. They were all freelancing. You got 11 guys out there freelancing, and they're not playing as a team. They're playing as really great individuals, and they sucked because what you need is a team. You have to be functioning as a team. The other thing you have to have is clarity in the roles. If somebody doesn't exactly know what their job is, if somebody doesn't understand what brings value to the company, they could be working hard, but they're working in the wrong direction. They're rowing, but they're rowing sideways, and everybody else is rowing forward and to the right, and they're rowing to the left. But they're rowing, they're in their paddling, they're burning energy, they're tired. So I think that this whole idea of alignment and roles and goals and understanding how we all work together and whose responsibility is what, I think that's where a lot of leaders fail, is that you have to have some difficult conversations. They're not comfortable. And you can read books
Yeah.
about that. There's seminars about difficult. Dominic, you're shaking your head. You've talked to people. This is
Oh,
an
yeah.
area that's very hot for you. Is this whole concept of having this difficult conversation. And it doesn't mean it's a bad conversation, but sometimes owners and leaders will avoid conflict or perceived conflict, but they actually end up generating more conflict over time by hiding their head and not addressing it when it really is starting up. They let it get too far down the road.
Yeah,
So that's an area.
I used to work for a company that one of their like mantras was like stop the drop. Like as soon as you notice something, just stop what you're doing and address it. And I don't think it's
Right.
about conflict necessarily as much as it is about accountability. That's really all
Yeah.
you're trying to do as a leader is hold the people that you put in those valued positions accountable for what they're responsible for.
Right. Right. And I didn't come up with this, but in all my seminars and trainings and readings over the years, I've come down to these three things. It's called hill, will, and skill. If somebody's not performing properly, sometimes a leader will say, we just need to skill them up. I need to send them to training. They need more training. They need more time learning this, that, blah, blah, blah. And that may or may not be true. The second point, it's like a three-legged stool. All three things have to work. And that is you need to move the hills. If somebody's trying to do their job, but they keep getting interrupted or something in the daily flow, or they have to go sit in on a meeting that's not really important to them, move the hills out of the way for people. Understand what their challenges are and try and address the challenges where you can. The employee responds by feeling like you really care about their job. You care about their well-being because you're trying to remove some frustration that's stopping them from being the A player. They're a B player right now, and you're going to make them an A player, but you got to remove some hills. You got to get some things out of the way. So those first two, hill and skill, those are on the employer. Those are on the leader. The third one, the three-legged stool, is will. And will is just people have it or they don't.
Sure.
And they might have it for one job or not another job. Or they might have had it 5 years ago, but man, you can only get up on that horse and ride so many times, before you get bucked off. And then on the 99th time, you're like, can't get up on the damn horse again. I just can't do it. And so you have to understand when the will is gone. And in that case, it's one of those things where you just have to have an honest conversation and say to the person, you're not happy. You don't like what's going on here. You can't make yourself do it anymore. That's fine. What are we going to do about it? Do we got to find something else for you? What does this look like? I think you have those human conversations, and you can have those when you have a smaller business. It's not like GE, they're going to get rid of 300 people. They're just damn near picking names. You know what I mean? It's very impersonal. But when you have a small business, you can have those conversations. And to that point, I take my employees out to dinner one-on-one once every 6 months because I want to talk to them as a human and a partner in my business and a part of the value chain. And, you find out, I don't know, they're having problems with their girlfriend, or they got something stolen, or just life's problem. They're struggling with something. And man, just to be there for somebody as a human, as and show compassion, talk about ideas and challenges and exchange ideas, that really bonds somebody. That bonds, one of your employees. And I think it creates a sense of belonging too, like it's a family. And we all have good days and we all have bad days. let's acknowledge our humanity and just say it's not all sunshine and roses, man. Some days are just bad days, and sometimes you're going through something, and you got to lean into that, and other people support people because you're going to need to be supported 2 months from now when something happens to you. So I like that concept. I've found that I've been able, Dominic, you said, what are your challenges? Employees, right? Employee turnover and that kind of thing. If you can keep your employees sticky, then there's less turnover, there's less training, there's less stop and start.
Yep.
The CEO of Costco, 15 years ago, was taking it pretty hard, in articles and so on and so forth, because his stock at that point wasn't performing as well as Walmart's. And he fired back by saying something to the effect of, listen, I think Walmart was trying to say they have happy customers. And he basically said, you don't have happy customers when you don't have happy employees. That's an absolute impossibility. And he said, we're going to pay what we're going to pay because I want happy employees that are happy to be at work because they're getting well compensated for what they're doing. That will flow out over time. Well, if you take Costco stock compared to Walmart from 2012, this will be a homework assignment for anybody watching this and listening. Take Walmart stock compared to Costco, and you tell me who's done better over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
Costco is going straight up and Walmart is going straight sideways. And he was right. And he was right because he was building a customer experience in Costco that when you go there, they're willing to open up another lane really quickly. If they see there's plenty of people around to ask, they smile at you, they'll direct you to the right place. They create a shopping experience that makes people just want to go there. It's just like, we're going to Costco. It's like an event, every couple of weeks to go to Costco. The kids look forward to it. That's not by accident. That is an intentioned crafting of a culture inside of a business to create a customer experience that people want to just keep experiencing. They love that. And he's obviously doing well, and the stock is doing well, and the shareholders are everybody's doing well. Everybody loves it. So what's the challenge? It's around employees, and it's holistically understanding your employee and understanding what's going on. If they trust you, they're willing to bring problems forward because they know it's a safe space. How many times in a company they're doing something stupid? Everybody on the floor knows that this is dumb. All the engineers know that it takes them X amount of time. Nobody says anything. They won't say anything for years, right? Everybody keeps quiet because they're afraid of bringing up the problem. How do you get any better if your employees don't surface a problem? And if you think as a leader that you can identify all the problems, you're crazy. You need your employees to tell you, we could be doing this better. This slows me down. Hey, there's a challenge over here. Do you realize this happens this way and I don't get the report? Thanks for telling me. Well, we got to get this fixed. So I
Well,
think it's
I
that.
think that's a big part. What you just said right there too is you're willing to accept the information and do something with it. Where some
Right.
employers that maybe not are the best at accepting that type of information, or maybe not putting it at the top of the priority list and just keep pushing it to the wayside. I think that goes into how the employees, their attitude, their emotions when they come to work. If they're bringing these problems to light and they're falling on deaf ears, then
Right.
that goes to just basically changing their attitude while they're at work. So the fact that you're actually listening, taking that into consideration and seeing what you could do with that information, I think goes to improving the attitudes of the employees as well. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah. And when you're an entrepreneur, you have the ability to do it. I get it. A big company, Procter and Gamble, GE, whatever the case may be, Citibank. I mean, there's a big monstrosity, and maybe they can't hear at the same level that I can as the owner with a fairly flat organization. But nevertheless, I can grow faster than those companies can grow, right? I can scale up more quickly. And so you have to use that as an entrepreneur. You use that ability to communicate with people, to listen and to build a culture that people want to be part of. One of the things in my garage business, my garage remodeling business, when we first started in 2018, that first year, I ended up running two crews. I had 4 employees, and it was a two-man crew, and we worked 5 days a week, and they were getting overtime and whatever. And what I found out was where we were making mistakes was on things that we were doing on Friday, because the guys were tired, man. They had physically worked all week long. They were mentally tired from the kind of work that we're doing, installing cabinets, doing slat wall, making fine cuts. You're having to think when we're doing, doing the floors and doing them right, the floor coatings. And so what you find out is you're just burning out your engine, man. You're burning your people because it's too much. It's just too much. And so what I implemented was 4 10-hour workdays. And this is win-win. Why? Because everybody gets a rotating day off during the week. We don't work weekends. So they might work Monday, Tuesday. They get Wednesday off. They can go to the gym. They can game, hang out with a girlfriend,
It's
take their
awesome.
kids to the water park, whatever. They can have a life. They can do these things that they can't do necessarily on the weekends. And they just have that day off. And then the 10-hour day versus the 8-hour day in my particular business, the guys are coming into my warehouse in my showroom in the morning. They're loading up their supplies that they need for the day. They're heading out in the trucks. They're driving the same amount of time to a customer, but in an 8-hour day, you might have an hour loading up and getting there and an hour cleaning up and coming back. You got 6 usable hours. In a 10-hour workday, I got 8 usable hours. So we're getting more revenue per employee per day, and it's more efficient. And then they get that day off. And guess what? My errors and my problems drop significantly because people are fresh.
Nice.
So that's just a little something, but it's like you can't do things unilaterally. You can't do things that are good for you and not good for the employee. Because you can command for a bit, but people will leave you and the good people will leave you. That's what goes on. So you got to
Yep.
find a way to create win-wins in whatever you possibly can. My joke is, this is just my religious thing, but I mean, if Adam and Eve ate the apple and we can't sit in the Garden of Eden with no clothes on right now and hang out with the snakes and the scary animals and eat fruit all day long, if that is no longer the case and we got to go to work every day, let's make it the best we possibly can. Because if we all got to do it, let's make it good for us and for everybody else around us. That's sort of my view on this.
Well, hey, I think that's a good place to stop. Let's continue to take care of your employees as business owners. Always look to innovate, always look to learn, continue that networking. I mean, a lot of great things in this podcast today. So anyone who's listening, I mean, Matt's been through it with a bunch of different businesses. Take his words of wisdom and run with them. So thank you so much, Matt. Like I said, a lot of great information today, and wishing nothing but the best here coming up in the future.
Thanks, Dominic. Same to you.